Dr. Hanning, in your many years of experience, how important have multilateral organizations been in fighting terrorism?
I think multilateral organizations are very important to provide information, to give a better assessment, a better access to information. And we have had, only as BND, but in my latest responsibility as well, have close contacts with UN. Not to forget the European Union. It's not a multilateral organization, but nevertheless, Brussels is getting a more and more important role in our daily business. I think, yes, this kind of cooperation is very valuable for the law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies.
In what particular areas is it important?
It's important for a better understanding in certain states, a better understanding of organizations, for example. That are the main issues on behalf of terrorism. In the other fields, I think that it's valuable as well. And there is a platform for exchange of information. And again, not only the data is important, it is very important to have this better understanding, a better access to the special situation in the countries, in the touched countries. And therefore, I think multilateral organization could be very helpful.
Eric, now, of course, you are biased, being a former director of the center here. But I want to ask you the same question. Why would America want to involve the UN, given that the capacity that America has in terms of intelligence, in terms of all these resources, is so much bigger than what, for example, the UN could offer? Shouldn't the world cooperate with America rather than America cooperating with the UN?
I think there are many ways where the UN can add value, and we're seeking more and more to engage with the UN. I mean, whether it's the political legitimacy that comes with delivering assistance or capacity building under a UN flag versus a US flag, given the political will issues in many countries and the reluctance of many countries to be seen publicly cooperating with the US, I think there's greater awareness in Washington of the need to work with in multilateral settings to accomplish those capacity building objectives. I think and this goes for assessments, UN assessments by CTED and other parts of the UN. It's the objectivity that comes with that assessment is critical, and then it provides donors a common baseline for considering how to work with that country in building capacity. But I think there are many advantages to working with the UN here, but I think we have to be also aware of the limitations that the UN right now has, and that a lot of the ad hoc gatherings that have been facilitated by the Australians and others to bring practitioners together, to bring counterterrorism policymakers together, is because the UN itself is not necessarily the best forum for these governments to convene at an expert level. And I think that's our challenge to the next phase of our international cooperation, to see if we can develop more sustained cross-regional practitioner-to-practitioner cooperation and dialogue on all these core issues: border management, law enforcement, international legal cooperation, prison de-radicalization. The UN is just not there yet. It's great at delivering in the field to individual countries and at the regional level, but as a convener of policymakers and practitioners, away from the politically divisive discussions of terrorism that often dominate the UN, I think the jury's still out on that, whether the UN can deliver.
Richard, you've heard it from the member states now. Would you say that's an accurate description of the sort of added value that you offer to them?
Well, yes, I would, but I would like, obviously, to add a few things to what they said. Eric's absolutely right. The UN is brilliant at process and not particularly good at outcomes. I accept that. But I think that, nonetheless, there are many ways that the UN can actually deliver outcomes effectively, and that's been shown particularly in this field of counterterrorism. I mean, Ambassador Patterson and Eric Rosand also mentioned this convening power. This convening power is enormously important. It really is. You talked about India, Pakistan. You have issues like Algeria and Morocco also, which are very critical to the whole business of counterterrorism, and of course in Southeast Asia, which you know very well too, there's all sorts of regional tensions which can much more easily be overcome under a UN flag than even under an Australian one, though I admire particularly what you've achieved with Indonesia. And that convening power, sure, is worthless unless you do something with it, unless you produce an outcome from it. But I think that the way that the UN is approaching some of these issues now, concentrating on particular groups of states, concentrating on particular issues, knowing its limitations, understanding, as Eric said, the importance of a proper normative base, proper legislative base in countries so they can deal with counterterrorism, getting awareness raised of the problems of one country understood better by other countries, getting countries to see that they face a common problem, despite all the bilateral noise that goes on around it. They face a common problem that they can deal with within the sort of more sterile box created by the UN. All those things, I think, are enormously valuable, and if we didn't have them, we'd have to invent them. So I think that the UN, sure, you can criticize it in many, many ways, but when you look at the delivery in the field, of course, it is quite remarkable what it does. And when now you look at its delivery on some of these thematic topics like counterterrorism, one would hope in the future on environment and so on, it also has an essential role.
Mm-hmm. Let me open to the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. And we have General Ashok, I think, no, yeah, in the first row. Could you please make sure he has a microphone?
Thank you. My name is General Ashok Mehta, and I'm from India. On counter-terrorism cooperation, I've noticed that amongst the panelists, they were a bit hesitant in acknowledging the operational side of the cooperation. In fact, they said it has improved. So obviously, there is more that can be done. My question is that since by now we are reasonably clear, if not completely clear, about which are the victim countries and where are the sources of terrorism, is it possible to draw up a network? In other words, is there some networking between the likely victim countries in sharing their resources on monitoring? For example, the chair mentioned that America has disproportionately better sources of monitoring and implementing some of these measures. So is there a network between these countries who are the likely victim? In other words, is there cooperation between countries who are the victims? My second question is, and I think this came out from the panel's discussion, that when bilaterally things do not work, for example, between India and Pakistan, for years we've been trying on some mechanism for cooperation, joint anti-terror mechanism. Nothing seems to work because there's lack of political will. Now, under these circumstances, is it possible for the international community or part of the international community or even the UN to come into this and to see how this cooperation can work better?
Thank you very much. We'll take one more question, maybe from the back. Not Howard again. He's had 3 questions, but in the very back. And then we'll take you afterwards. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's Anthony Duplessis from the Institute for Security Studies in South Africa.